Welcome, my friends, back to the fog. In this realm, there's no such thing as a backseater. No one can claim to be impartial. Either you stand opposed to the fog and resist, or you serve it and allow the blood to flow willingly. There can be no alternative. You either stand up to the madness or you succumb to it. Felix Richter tried to remain uninvolved, and he failed miserably. As a child, Felix's parents often talked about their secret society who stood opposed to some unknown darkness or entity that Felix couldn't bother to care about. It was all strange to him anyway. What Felix truly had a passion for was architecture and innovation. Traveling with his family allowed him to truly grasp and enjoy the different machinations of building, construction, and design. Despite this, Felix had few friends, something that worried his father. He was socially awkward and not all that interested in fixing it. Felix spent more time in libraries than he did in social gatherings. The only friends he ever made were the few friends his age who he met when his parents had their secret society meetings on Dyer Island. They all shared the same disinterest that Felix did, and thus they named themselves the Pariahs. They spent their time together exploring Dyer's Island, where their parents held their silly meetings. It was all just a big joke. Well, until one fateful day. One night, while exploring a hidden part of the island, in which horrid human experiments were performed, the ground shook. Dark, clawed tendrils and hands burst forth to snare them and drag them into the increasingly dark fog that was appearing. Terrified, the pariahs were fortunately saved by their parents, rushing in and using strange weapons and tools to fend off the fog. Felix and his friends managed to get away, but when they returned for their parents, they were gone. No trace of them remained. Felix and his friends would spend years working to uncover theories and secrets to try to figure out what happened to their parents and why they had disappeared. But as time went on and nothing ever came up, soon the pariahs parted ways, all growing less and less interested. They had lives to live, and it was time for them to move on. Even Felix felt the call of his career leading him away. Felix became an outstanding architect, challenging old-fashioned ideas with new, innovative, and expressive building designs and contracts. He also took the time to work on his social skills like his father had wanted. He was hosting parties, putting on a facade of a man who could charm and woo any clients and firms he wanted to hire him as their architect, until he formed his own architectural business himself. And yet he always felt like he was just a phony, a fake. This wasn't who he really was. What was Felix? A child who never trusted his family until they were taken from him? A man so cowardly he couldn't keep searching for them? A cheap engineer who put on a fake smile for men and women who knew nothing about him? He wanted to see his father again. He needed direction. He wanted his father's advice, especially with the news his girlfriend had for him. He was about to become a father himself. Desperate to turn his life and persona around, Felix dove into parenting books and worked on jobs more for himself than to please others. He wanted to be someone his unborn child and father would be proud of, and he got his chance. Some old friends of his father's approached Felix with a unique offer. They were wanting to begin a project to rebuild the properties at Dyer Island, the place where Felix lost everything. While looking over the project, Felix was both excited and terrified. Was this right? Was this what he should do? His father had disappeared here. He'd lost everything here. Was it right to walk in and restore it when perhaps it was best to be left all behind? Whether right or wrong, Felix was now back on that island, examining the project when he saw someone in the fog. His father. Felix was beside himself. His father was there, alive and there. He ran to his father happily, ready to tell him everything, to share in an embrace that he so missed. But his father just frowned at Felix, shaking his head in disappointment, before turning to walk back into the fog. Felix wouldn't let him go. He couldn't. He wanted to make his father proud. He just had to. And so he chased his father into the fog and was never seen again. So, I'm not entirely sure how to feel about Felix's lore. I mean, okay, it's not bad necessarily, far from it, but it feels like it's not quite there. I mean, I would think that the father's loss would have more of a direct impact on Felix. So basically what we have here is a story of a kid whose parents were into the secret society stuff about fighting a dark entity or force, obviously the entity from Dead by Daylight, and then he never believes it, he never buys into it, he's not all that invested in it, he doesn't think it's real, he thinks it's all weird stuff. But then one day that stuff actually comes out and tries to snare him, but instead takes his family who are trying to protect him. And so he spends a lot of his young years trying to figure out what might have happened to them, only to give up and become an architect. And I'm kind of like, okay, there's something there, but shouldn't he be more addled with guilt? I mean, we read about him in the lore like He puts on a facade to become a better architect. He tries to learn how to be social so that he can get more money. He starts living the pompous lifestyle. Yeah, he considers himself a phony, but he really doesn't focus all that much on his family. Like, it says a few times that he wishes his father was around to give him advice, but I don't know. I feel like if I was in Felix's place and my parents sacrificed themselves to save me, I would be way more invested through the rest of my life. That would have scarred me. I wouldn't have been able to go on with my career that easily. I don't know. And you might say, well, I don't know, Raven. He might have gotten over it on his own time. Maybe so, but couldn't we have explored that a bit more in his lore? It felt a little sudden to just say, well, and then slowly their friends just moved on, and so did he. And then we're back into the architectural stuff. Like, really? Like, we're jumping back into that? I don't even know. And then he sees his father and chases after him into the fog, and that's how he ends up here, which is fine. I guess I would say that it's decent lore. It's definitely better than some of the ones we've seen before. Like, at least it provides us with a clear character. But I guess I was looking for a little bit more than that. I think the idea of his family being aware of the entity and wanting to fight him, like a secret society that's aware of the evils of the entity and trying to stand up to it, I'd like to explore that a bit. Like, what do they do? Like, how can you fight the entity? How do they actually fight the entity off to keep it from getting their kids? And how did they get taken? Are they somewhere in the entity's realm, or are they just a part of the entity's world now? Like, what happened to them? And there's a lot of, answer. That's some pretty cool stuff. I hope Dead by Daylight actually answers that. But maybe they were actual parts of the trial, but somehow they resisted well enough that they're not part of it anymore. I don't know. There's stuff there. I really want to see that explored more, but we didn't. We focused more on Felix becoming an architect. And there were also a few phrases and words in there, like saying that he was fighting against modernistic trends. The hell does that have to do with anything? Like, you had a good story here and you ran away from it. I think that's the big problem here. But overall, it's not bad. It's just, I think it's missing something. But let's be honest, it's not the lore that people love about Felix. It is his perks. And these are some great perks. Felix uses Built to Last, Desperate Measures, and Visionary. Built to Last is an outstanding item perk. If you have depleted your item in your hand and you hide in a locker for 12 seconds, the item's charge will replenish to 99%. Each time Built to Last is used, that number is decreased by 33%. So to put it simply, this perk can be used to ensure you're always making the most of whatever item you're carrying, and if you should ever fully run out of the item's charge and Built to Last has been used too much on it, just find a new item. Pretty nice perk, I must say. Like, it's pretty useful. Desperate Measures isn't quite as good, but it still has its uses. For each injured, dying, or hooked survivor, you gain a 14% stackable increase in speed to healing and unhooking actions for a max of 56%. Handy to keep your teammates in the game and to quickly get the heals and unhooks you need, but it should be noted that as you heal survivors, you decrease the percentage, so I guess it pays to keep yourself injured at all times, so you always at least have that 14% injured? I don't know. And then Visionary. This may as well be his best perk. In fact, I'd say it's one of the best survivor perks in the game for one reason. You have the ability to see the auras of all generators within 32 meters of you. Yes, you can see all the generators. You don't need to keep wandering around looking, you can see them. Now, each time a generator is completed, this perk deactivates for 12 seconds. But the ability to find all generators in the trial makes Visionary incredibly useful and allows an edge for the survivors to be able to see what the killer does, allowing you to formulate a strategy on which gens to work on in the quickest succession. I love this perk. I may start running it on more of my survivors. And that's pretty much all I have to say about Felix Richter. I know this is a short one, but frankly, there wasn't a whole lot to say, which is weird because his lore was pretty long. This was a more lengthy lore to read, but as I read it, I was kind of like, there's not a lot here. There's a lot of repetition in this lore. We're just restating the same stuff over and over again. I feel like the guy who's writing it is pushing himself to try to write longer and longer lore. But you know what? Instead of writing the same things over and over and over again, why don't you expand on what you already have that could be interesting? Like, what tools did the parents use to fight the entity? What's the entity doing on Dire Island? What does the secret society think about the entity? What do they think it is? Like, what happened to his parents? Like, why did he just give up on his parents so quickly? I don't know. There's stuff there. There's something there that I'm missing. But now that we're done with Felix, it's time to talk about the killer that comes with him, and that is the Blight. And oh boy, I can't wait to talk about this. But that's for next time in the Fog. Take care, everybody.